Thanks very much, Nicola.
Thank you.
Very, very comprehensive. You made some excellent points. I'd like to just pick on one right now to keep it on the table. And that's the last point you made, the institutional arrangement, because this is such a complex project, and this is going to be a decades-long project. So we need an institutional framework which will survive the changes that is inevitably to happen as we go along. So I'm very glad you raised it, something that I'll keep for our own discussion, because at the moment is very much state to state driven and without an anchor, and leader to leader. Yeah. Thanks very much for raising it. There is an echo on this, I think, but we'll just have to live with it. Okay, Axel, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much also to the organizers, RAS, SOIS, for inviting me very spontaneously, but it's a great pleasure to be here to continue our discussion we had in Bellagio, for example. And being the last one on the panel is actually a good thing because many things have already been discussed and mentioned, so I should try to be brief so that we can also have some time for additional discussions. A couple of points. Perhaps let me start with the geopolitical significance of IMEC, at least from my personal view. As you know, in Europe we have had intensive discussions of decoupling and de-risking. Decoupling from Russia, of course, due to Russia's war against Ukraine and the sanctions regime we've put in place. But we are already also discussing depending on who you ask, decoupling or de-risking from China. And now, obviously, also we are discussing a de-risking, or perhaps should be discussing a de-risking from a increasingly volatile, unpredictable US administration. So my sense is that we definitely need new partnerships. We need to reflect on new partnerships from a European perspective and also from a German perspective. I will touch upon the German perspective very briefly in a couple of minutes. But in this multi-coalition world, multipolar world, Europe really needs to look out for new partners beyond China, beyond the US, beyond Russia, and I think Nicola already made the case and explained it very well why IMEC might be a good vehicle, an institutional framework in order to increase relations and improve relations with the Gulf states, with the Middle East, but in particular also with India. And yeah, on that front, I think it needs to be highlighted that the new EU Commission, von der Leyen II Commission, if you like, made a bold step and visited India with I don't know whether it was the whole set of commissioners, but it was a large group, 27, 27 commissioners. So that's quite a significant signal. And also, if you look at the concrete outcomes of the meetings, they were pretty concrete, at least for in terms of EU international relations. Obviously, the free trade agreement is high on the agenda from a European side. I understand that also India is putting a strong emphasis on bilateral trading relations, free trade agreements, and with a couple of countries, but in particular also with the EU. So let's hope that we will have progress on that front, because that's a very important signal, not only for EU-India trade, but also for the international trading system. A number of other concrete outcomes of these discussions and negotiations, which I won't go into the detail, but IMEC obviously is also part of these discussions and a very, very important part of these discussions. So new partnerships are necessary. Where do we stand from a German perspective? I mean, Germany is a signatory of IMEC, but in contrast to Italy, in contrast to France, unfortunately, we do not have a proper discussion on IMEC, a proper discussion on German-Indian relations, how to strengthen them, how to strengthen EU-India relations. So I would hope that these discussions will start, will deepen when we have a new government. As you know, we are currently in a phase of transition from the Scholz-led coalition government to a new government coalition, most probably led by the conservatives, conservative Chancellor Merz, and who is or who used to be a strong advocate of transatlantic relations, but I think he also was very much shocked by the Munich Security Conference and all the other developments we had recently. So I would hope he's also rethinking his approach and the need to increase partnerships, in particular with India and with the Middle East. Again, IMEC as a very good and solid strategic idea. Let me perhaps then talk a little bit about IMEC as a vision, as a strategy. I think many colleagues already mentioned that it's not just, or it should not just be a project about hard infrastructure, about a mega infrastructure project. Just like a free trade agreement is not just a trade agreement; it's also a diplomatic instrument. It's a strategic instrument. So I would hope that IMEC is part of a larger strategy vis-à-vis the Middle East, vis-à-vis Europe. And again, I think Nicola touched upon many of the important points, which I will not repeat. Just a yeah, just a couple of words on some countries that are not part of IMEC and who could be potential spoilers of the initiative. I'm here referring especially to Egypt and Turkey, who have come out very strongly against the idea of IMEC. So that, I think what we need to take into account are also diplomatic um, outreach activities towards these countries, these two countries, and perhaps other countries as well, who to bring them on board and to explain the IMEC idea, explain the complementarity of IMEC. I mean, I think this was also something we've discussed in Bellagio, no? Sachin, that IMEC is not replacing the trade route through the Suez Canal, but it's complementing it. It's creating more resilience in our trade route, in our global value chains. So we need to invest also in the relationships of the countries who are not signatories of IMEC to bring them on board. US also a very important actor. I'm hopeful that the commitment of the US will stay, will be there, because the US also plays a key role in the Middle East, and in the Middle East, as also alluded to previously, is kind of the weak link at the moment in this strategic idea. And here, I would hope the US plays a key role in order to improve the security conditions, the basic security conditions in the Middle East, and in particular, obviously, in the in Israel and around Israel. That's obviously also a key political diplomatic goal we should also support and keep into account. But at the same time, I would strongly argue that we should not, as Europeans, wait for, and perhaps also as Indians, should not wait for the US to come on board and really support it, but it's about a strategic autonomy. That's a term used quite often in the EU terms, and we should really move forward with IMEC because it's really a strategic and economically beneficial endeavor. Let me perhaps close with a couple of points on the development dimension of IMEC. And here I think we should mention and emphasize the issue of inclusiveness. Again, the speakers, previous speakers have also mentioned the inclusiveness in terms of the industrial development we would like to foster with IMEC should also include obviously the larger business sector, which in our economies is often based on SMEs. No, we should not only focus on the large corporations, the large ports, but also put in place industrial development strategies which focus also on SMEs, which focus on sustainability. So the industrialization processes we would like to foster should be green industrialization processes. And we should also not forget the neighboring countries. So how does IMEC connect to other to the neighboring countries, in particular in South Asia, to other trade routes, to other transport and economic corridors? So that these are important questions. And let me finish by also highlighting the trade dimension. So trade facilitation, I think, was already mentioned before. Investment facilitation, I think it's hugely important to also reflect on the processes, the standards that need to be aligned in order to ensure that the goods that should travel through the IMEC corridor, which cross many borders, that these connections are efficient as possible. So trade facilitation is important, but also investment facilitation, because we need a lot of foreign direct investments in order to ensure that the IMEC vision will become operational, if you like. And the last point I'd like to make, and that's just to emphasize what our RAS colleagues, of course, are also pushing forward. We need think tank collaboration. We need also think about the science systems, how they can collaborate better in order to support the IMEC vision, but then also support mutually beneficial economic relationships, which are based on the science system, on technology, research, and innovation. So these are a couple of points, hopefully complementary what we've heard before. So back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Axel. Thank you. Again, a very comprehensive presentation, and being last on the panel didn't seem to have any influence on you at all. You had such new points to make, so appreciate that. Thank you. All the speakers have been so good and comprehensive that I, as a chair, have failed to impose the guillotine of time. But I did that intentionally because I think it was very important to hear them in depth. So thank you very much, all of you. But because of time, I think if you all would agree, I'll switch around the order a bit so that I can hand over to Dr. Chaturvedi in time. I've still got about 20 minutes of mine. Okay. So if you would agree, I was intending a discussion amongst ourselves, but I'll pass on to Q&A and then incorporate the answers into our thing. But before that, if I may, I'll cut down my time for as a panelist. Just take a few minutes to talk about my experiences on economic corridors, okay? I'll try to keep it very brief. First of all, it can be done. I'm now talking about economic corridors which have been built, are functional, and some of them we started, particularly in the Indochina area, when the Indochina war was actually still going on. So when I despaired about some of the issues that you have raised very rightly about the global geopolitics, I remember that one of our meetings was held on the shores of Bangkok, and we were actually, uh, sorry, Vientiane, and there were explosive bombs being lobbed into the hotel area where we were meeting. So from that situation, we actually did ultimately build what became the East-West Economic Corridor connecting Haiphong all the way to Bangkok. And those are in place. Huh? So 5 lessons that I want to share with you, and I must say that these 5 are really statements of mea culpa because I made a mistake on all of them. And I'm learning from that. First, that the economic corridors, great as they produce a lot of economic benefits. That's a win-win proposition, but it's not an equal win-win. There's an asymmetry of benefits and costs. So some gain more, some gain less, but both gain. But that political process of understanding between countries, that it is not going to be that each project will produce equal benefits for each. So you will get a bit here and a bit less there, but it has to be. So that's very important. And we didn't do it very well, certainly in the beginning. But more importantly, economic corridor projects benefit a large number of people, but the costs are borne by a few. The immediate costs of resettlement, of displacement, of losing jobs. And we, in the sort of policy-making roles or multilateral banks role, we very glibly assume, rightly so, that because the gains are large, the gainers will compensate the losers, okay? And that will be left to the states to do it. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. So the losers actually lose, and this redistribution doesn't happen. As a matter of fact, that is really one of the criticisms, rightly so, of globalization. And some of the reactions and backlashes we get against globalization is because the losers feel they've really lost out, and society has not compensated that. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, and therefore I was very struck, Isano-san, about your emphasis on inequality. Actually, we found that inequality was exacerbated in several of our countries, and we didn't care about it enough early on. So that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, hardware is not easy, but is relatively easy compared to the software. It took us 3 years to build a certain corridor between Laos and Thailand. It took us 5 years to conclude some interconnectivity agreements, which included recognizing driver's license, very mundane things, getting a one-stop customs window, rationalizing the procedure of customs movement. There's no point of building a corridor if you've got to stop at every border point, etc. And this would involve not just the institutional aspects, like I said, but also the social and the environmental impacts. Again, in the early days, we didn't care as much as we should have about the resettlement issues, about the environmental impacts. We thought of it as an afterthought. So right at the beginning, and this is why I'm very impressed actually that Professor Chaturvedi has already mentioned that you have got groups working on the societal aspects and environmental aspects. So you can't build first and then worry about the software. This has to be an integral process. Number 3, you've got to think big, have a grand vision, but then follow a Lego model implementation. Take small bits which can fit, and this shouldn't be haphazard, but economic corridors, particularly of the scope like IMEC, is going to be huge and complex, and there'll be many skeptics. So you've got to start showing some successes early, take the smaller ones, and they serve as very good confidence building measures. Because people, the losers, would want to see that there is some gain to them overall. And that's something that, again, you're tempted to go big, think big, and do the big projects first, and leave the small ones outside. Particularly the smaller countries. We started off by emphasizing the larger countries and realized very quickly that instead of doing projects involving Thailand, we should do projects involving Laos, because then sort of, the smaller countries see there's something in it, not just the big brother sort of, dominating. The fifth one, the fourth one was really something that Sanjeev has already referred to, the involvement of the private sector. The bottom line is that economic corridors, this will be no exception, is going to be extraordinarily expensive. Public sector, including the MDBs, will not be able to fund even a fraction of it. They have a different role. They bring in the enabling environment, they motivate, they catalyze, but the private sector has to be built in or brought in early on. This is a serious mistake we made in our economic corridor projects in Southeast Asia, and we paid a price for it. So private sectors have a very important role to play, and I was struck, Sanjeev, by your comment that you think that the individual components can be business viable. The private sector has to be convinced of that, so the projects are prepared, they have to be bankable, and sooner the better. And the fifth and the last one is keep talking. I was struck and very pleased that again, RIS and conference in Bellagio has mentioned others. You need to keep talking, you need to have the momentum building. This project, like every other project, will go through a honeymoon period. We probably are still in it. And then something will go wrong, political changes will happen, and people say, IMEC was another idea. So you need to keep the momentum. Particularly, we need to talk to the civil society. The ultimately is the people who bear the cost and the brunt of resettlement and all of that. And sometimes, and it happened with us, so these are all mea culpas, they heard about the project when the bulldozers were literally at their door, which was totally silly of us not to do it early. So keep talking, and that sort of, So those are the 5 broad lessons that I thought I'll share with you for whatever they're worth. Okay? Okay. Maybe, with permission of my co-panelists, I'll throw it open to the floor. Take some questions for about questions, answers for about 15 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up, okay? So, yeah, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. Uh, I'm Gulshan Sachdeva. I'm Chief Coordinator here of the Global South Center for Excellence. I've been following this corridors for quite some time, and IMEC, both from the Indian perspective, and since I am also Professor of European Studies, also from the European perspective. What we have learned, it's a fascinating discussion since morning. It's going to be transformative, big idea. It's also, we saw some numbers on growth, trade, etc. But my question to all panelists is, who is going to put money behind this project? I'm not looking for broad answers. It's come from multilateral organizations, from the private sector. They may at some point, but initial money has to be committed by somebody, particularly the states. Do we know all the signatories? Is there any specific, commitment funding-wise to this project? Thank you.
With your permission, we'll take a few more, and then we'll sort of group them together, and we'll split up the questions between us. Yeah, any other? Yeah, please.
Thanks so much, Chair, and then the eminent panel. I am Arnab Bandyopadhyay from World Bank. I have a specific question actually to Isonu-san. Fascinating, analysis, the modeling which you have done, and my understanding is kind of you have taken 3 steps of demand modeling, then economic cost benefit analysis, and then doing a CGE. But particularly this corridor, as many of the speakers have highlighted, will have a very long evolution from a transport corridor to an economic corridor to a development corridor. So some of the numbers which we are kind of, the assumptions or parameterization which you have done, will have to have a temporal dimension. It's very difficult to say that country X will have this much of GDP gain. It will happen over a very long period, as this evolution happens. So I just wanted to get your reflection on that, that how will you build in such a model the temporal dimension of it? One other, question or rather general comment to everyone else in the panel. I think this was a very, very rich deliberation, and really appreciated the openness and the candid discussions which you had. But like what we have seen, even in other small fragments of such initiative elsewhere, on any regional integration kind of initiative in the region, we need to have some kind of a track to diplomacy, which is informal in nature. One example I would give you: we are trying to develop this regional energy market here, and what we do every year from the World Bank is we organize a conference of secretaries, which is purely informal in nature, at different places, and that deliberation is actually not recorded but gives an excellent opportunity for the secretaries to discuss among themselves what are the emerging challenges in that particular space. So I was just thinking on organizations like RIS and other who is kind of like-minded organizations, and I'm sure we'll be very happy to help, and so other development banks. How can we, if you have any reflection, how can we actually join hands to support such initiatives? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah. Can a microphone there? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm Shaun Ray from ICREA. I had a question regarding the point about inclusivity that was mentioned. So it's not only how the people who are going to be affected, that is going to be, how they will be resettled, etc., but also the issue of countries, which Dr. Berger referred to, the countries who have opposed the IMEC. There will be some pains there as well. So is there some assessment of how countries like Egypt, Turkey, etc., will stand to lose, and how they, in the inclusion process, will take care of that as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hello to all. I'm Rajani Garg from Society of Indian Ocean Studies. So, driven by the curiosity that I came across a statement today that is about democratization of technology and also giving technology to the developing countries. I'm just curious to know as to, I was going through the document of IMEC corridor. There was nothing written about technology coordination. So when we are talking about IMEC or when we are talking about shipping, we do require satellite navigation system, etc. And at the same time, AI and satellite becomes very important to counter piracy. So under those circumstances, can we look forward to that of space coordination in future regarding IMEC? Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
I want to compliment the panel and my own batchmate Sanjeevji for giving me a good idea and new idea rather. Sir, my submission is that the world could manage revenge of history after two world wars and perhaps be concluded as end of history, which is again being disputed. Do you think that world is yet to learn from revenge of geography? IMEC is going to be fairly ambitious, but post-NATO world and Trump 2 world is shaking the public policy in many areas. How we hedge these political upheavals, because Egypt question has been raised, Egypt and Turkey. Will they not destabilize this IMEC as an idea itself before we start perhaps harvesting the gains?
I'm so glad you said that. But we'll try. We'll make some comments on it. Yeah? Good. Since we have five, let's do that. Otherwise, we'll lose track of these and we'll come back for a quick second round, huh? Just to do justice to you and the others, okay? Okay. So, almost arbitrarily, I've thought of some assignments here, but if you feel it's not fair, who will put money into the projects? Maybe Sanjeev, yeah. I mean, see, you were almost sort of volunteering, right? So, please.
Thank you. I think this is a very, very valid question. The fact that a corridor like this, with the MOU being signed by the powers that be, the expectations is that the countries would put in their bit. While the numbers are to be worked out or would evolve as we go along, the fact that the idea that we talked of and the fact that the various components of the project makes business sense, uh, the various components that are being put in place are going to make business sense. Uh, One example that I could like to give you is something closer home, things which are already happening. India and UAE have the framework agreement. The stakeholders on both sides see a great opportunity in the project. And therefore, DP World bid for the Tuna Tekra container terminal and gave per container handling charge, which is one of the highest they ever gave. They know that along with Tuna Tekra container terminal, which would give them good business for the upcoming IMEC route, also would give them a foothold in the Kandla Free Trade Zone. And with their strength on the Dubai side, Jebel Ali port, and the free trade zone there, they see a huge opportunity with the container cargo being agglomerated on the Dubai side from countries in the Middle East, starting from Iran, Iraq, and the rest of it, which otherwise find difficulties in going on the main route, and on the Indian side with the kind of markets that we have. So they saw a business sense and made a bid which was the highest ever for a container terminal. And they are at it, and they're putting about $5 million to be able to get things started. On the Dubai side also, there are plans of huge investment. So each of these segments, which are futuristic, the green hydrogen part, the data part, would make business sense. As Professor Nag mentioned, the World Bank, the ADB have already been trying to push these economic corridors. And we had Mr. Bandyopadhyay willing to come forward with the track two kind of initiatives. So I am sure the World Bank and ADB would be looking for projects which are viable and be doing the hand holding. So the multilateral banks, the countries themselves, there would be some projects here, for example, there are components here where maybe the countries, the viability may not be good enough for the private sector to jump in. And if the political commitment is there, some of the railway line segments, so on and so forth, would have to be funded by the countries per se. So it would have to be a mix of all this, and it is the idea which is mature, and there's no stopping it. And with the idea which is mature and no stopping it, I am sure every stakeholder would be able to risk whatever it is to be able to gain out of it. Gain financially, gain in terms of economic terms, gain in terms of development terms. So each stakeholder would have its own gains which they look at while putting in the money. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjeev. If I just may add, I think that in addition to, of course, it's key to get the private sector in, and therefore it has to be, bankable. But I think it's important that the states, the public sector, make some commitments upfront, which will essentially serve as a seed money, catalyst money, whatever. I think that's tremendously important. It can be only 5%, even 1%, but that's important. And the other thing is bringing the MDBs early on, because these things are going to be hugely expensive. Again, the MDBs will not be able to fund the projects in its entirety. Some of them are not eligible, but they will serve as a catalyst and a comfort for the private sector to come in. So it has to be ultimately, Sanjeev, what you have been saying all along, PPTs have to be brought in. Okay. Honorable, you had a question to Isono-san on the, please, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to answer some of the questions. The first one is who is paid the international project, because in my experience in the geographical simulation model, the international infrastructure project always has an issue, meaning that one country must pay for the infrastructure, but the benefit goes to another country. It is very difficult. And I just finished the analysis in Mongolia, and then Mongolia has many projects connecting between Russia and China. And then actually the Mongolia has to pay the infrastructure, but the benefits goes mainly to the Russia and China. And then always it has an issue. Then that's why we need to have the involvement of the ADB or the international organization, and also the strong how to say negotiation between the stakeholders like international cooperation is very important. Then second one is about the specific questions about the simulations. That is the very good point, and also the good point of our the simulation model itself. Our model has some the structural change in the model, and gradually the changes the structure of the economy. Then once we have the infrastructure, then if it is beneficial, then some country may use. Then if the companies that has some benefit or the gains, then it has some ripple effect. Another companies may come, and also the more people come to the place to engaging in then that makes the industrial agglomerations and also the industrial clusters formation. Then it has some structural change of the inside the country or even inside the region. Then that has the function of the forming the economic corridor in the long run. Then our model has always show some economic impact in 10 years or even the 15 years. Then we see that the impact. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nicola has to leave soon, so maybe I'll just turn to you. And if you could take the question raised by Mr. Bandyopadhyay on the track 2 discussions. You alluded to some of that. So how do you see that informal and very important part of the exercise proceeding involving in Europe?
Definitely, I believe the track to diplomacy, not only on this kind of issues, but in general, is has given good results when used, and we should implement that in Europe, especially trying to involve. I mean, in Europe and India, of course, and all participating countries, trying to involve think tanks that have influence and relations on policymakers on the one hand, and on the business community on the other hand, given that I agree with the fact that private-public partnerships are central to a project like this. So I think it's feasible to create track 2 diplomacy, especially where, I mean, in Italy it would be feasible, probably in France as well, since there is already a debate. Maybe, as Dr. Berger said, but he will answer, in Germany there is no debate yet, but in Italy there is a debate among policymakers, there's a debate among experts. All we have to do is bring them together and reach out to the private sector as well. So in order to create an inclusive track 2 or even track 1.5 framework for this.
Nicola, and if I may just add on, I think World Bank, ADB, and the MDBs really need to play a very important supportive role with the government sort of playing that coordinating. But this is where I think the point made by our speakers at the inaugural session and also here, that sooner we expand the tent, the better. Keep talking. So bring in people, bring in the civil society. The biggest problems we had in the projects which were, we thought, excellently conceived, hit the ground, and then people sort of said, what's all this about? So I think sooner we talk on as regional integration in track 2, And even I would say track 3, track 4, the better it will be. Axel, if I may request you to take the question from our colleague from ICRIER on, how do we get these spoilers? I would sort of, think that's a very important one. You raised it. I was going to raise it in our discussion. So how do we bring those countries in which are not in at the moment, and who have a different view on the subject?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a tough question, obviously. Obviously, I raised the issue without having a final answer to that, but that's definitely also something that's homework for all of us. I think it's key. Keep talking. I think that's one of the key elements, and to emphasize the complementarity of IMEC. I mean, obviously, we talk about IMEC, and that's at the center of our discussion. But there are other trade routes through the Suez Canal. Turkey immediately announced that they would also like to build um, additional corridors, railways. I think that's a good thing. Having various routes through which trade goods and services can travel is a good thing because it increases resilience. So I think the idea is to increase the connectivity between the corridors and to really emphasize their complementarity, and which is in the end beneficial for all of us because it increases resilience for all of us. But that needs to be, this message needs to be conveyed, and there needs to be a concrete diplomatic outreach to these countries. So that would be my initial answer. So when we think about diplomatic outreach, trade to diplomacy, we should also think about these countries that are not part of the core team of IMEC, but would need to be brought on board.
Thanks, Axel. I'll sort of make an attempt to answer your question, comment on your question, which is a very, very relevant one. And as a matter of fact, I think, Sachin, that's an assignment an institution like RIS can take on, which really is the people-to-people exchange. Because of course, and I think we all are very committed regional integration believers and globalization believers, etc. But I also have learned that maybe we just convinced ourselves that we were right and didn't feel the need to get our point across. Having said that, it also shows the importance of not taking any alignment with anybody for granted forever. What was it that Kissinger said? Of course, you would know, sir. There are no permanent friends, but only permanent interests, or something to that effect. He said it in a very cynical way, but I think there's some merit in that. So what I believe is that regional integration, globalization, sort of IMEC that we're talking about, is beneficial for all. But I kept saying that there are losers in the process, and believers like us get so convinced by our own religion that we don't think anything more needs to be said. And that is where I think went wrong. And this is where you get Trump 2.2 or 2.0 or whatever you get. So take those concerns seriously. IMEC will produce losers, let's be clear about it. How do we bring them on board? There will be spoilers from their interest, they're right. How do we bring them on? How do we integrate the discussion of IMEC vis-a-vis BRI? And Sanjeev made a very good point earlier when I was speaking to him, that BRI and IMEC are not in competition, but it is perceived by some in that way. So how do we get the story across? I think that's going to be a very important one. But again, that's the statement of a believer. Yeah, last two questions and then I'll have to close. Please, yeah.
Thank you, sir. My question connects with Dr. Berger's concern and something which has been highlighted already a couple of times about potential hindrances created by countries like Turkey, Egypt, etc. Relating to Turkey, I have a question which can be treated as a suggestion as well. I mean, Turkey itself is embarking on a project of Iraq-Turkey EU development road project, which it tries to pitch as a quicker alternative to IMEC. I mean, historically, India's connections with Europe have necessarily involved stops in Basra port of Iraq
Can you
or Istanbul.
frame the question,
So, I
please?
mean, if we are seeking complementarities, why can't IMEC branch off and connect with this Turkish initiative which is connecting Iraq to Europe?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Please.
Sir, I'm Jeev Agarwal. I work on West Asia. My question is to Sanjeev Ranjan sir, who shown the structural map. So on the eastern board, we have 4 or 5 ports from India, maybe more, which will be embarking the containers. Then you have maybe 2 ports or maybe more offloading at UAE, Fujairah, Jabil, etc. But peculiarly, there's only one offloading point from the Arabian Peninsula onto the European side into the Mediterranean Sea, that is only Haifa. So why only putting eggs in one basket at Haifa, that too in the center of a conflict zone? Is there a structural flaw in the IMEC in that way?
Very quick answer.
Thank you. I think the alignment which I showed is one of the possibilities. And as your previous question was, that there are alternative network connectivities which are possible. Now, as we go forward, the alignment and networks will evolve depending on the commercial viability of the various possibilities. So, as you said, if there's a challenge at a particular point, there will be alternatives that will open up, and we should be open to that idea, and only then can the whole project go through. So, it's a project which is evolving in its design and its implementation. And what makes business sense will come in place. What doesn't make business sense would fall off the radar. So that's the kind of redesign which will keep happening as we go forward. Thank you.
Good. I'm very sorry I missed your question, answering the question that you raised about democratization of technology. Sanjeev, you want to take that about democratization?
For example, the fact that as the IMEC projects are going to be futuristic, I again come back to the example of the ports. You have the Maitri thing which has already been launched, where Indian ports and the UAE ports are working hand in hand to make container movement seamless. I am sure we have the chairman JNPT is here who's going to take a talk at length about it. So when it comes to container tracking, the switching taking place, it is not just the data linkages, it is the satellites, the space, every conceivable technology that you can think of would be at play to make it happen. And as technology evolves, it is for the best business players to be able to adopt that, again, to make a business case and make money out of it. So data sharing, the way the containers are being loaded, reloaded, repositioned, would all happen using the satellites, using data linkages, so that there is no stagnation, it is seamless, it is real time. So that's the future of logistics, and that is inevitable. That has to be used for it to succeed and survive.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Chaturvedi has already been very kind to me by getting tea served inside so that I can eat into the tea room, tea break. So I shouldn't extend that courtesy any further. We have to bring this to a close, interesting and exciting as it is. It would be quite unwise of me to try to summarize this very rich discussion. So I will just end by thanking you all for very, very intense and very good discussion. And I'm sure you'll share your notes or your presentations. And of course, this is just beginning of many discussions that I'm sure RIS will have. And RIS, thank you very much for having, and SIOS, I mean, we jointly hosted this, for putting this together. And I think if we have succeeded in getting a bit down from 30,000 feet, not quite to the ground level, we have succeeded. And thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for chairing an excellent session and excellent contributions by our eminent panelists. So I'll request Dr. S.N. Tripathi, governing board member of SIOS, to present a small token of appreciation to the chair first and then our panelists.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sir, camera.
Oh, sorry. Let me get out of the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, Miran, you are. Acha. Sorry, it has to be a repeat. Thank you. Thank you. Move out.
Just a photogenic. Sir. Thank you, sir.
Give us just 1 minute to change the nameplates, but please be here and we continue the excellent and interesting set of issues that we discussed in the first session.
Sir, Chairman, sir. Sir.
Please, please.
Chaturvedi, sir. Chaturvedi, sir. आ जाओ अरे
Thank you. Very cool. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Oh, very good. You can collect such a good panel. I love that. This should do that. Thank you. I'll borrow your phone because I've got to reach my. But let me first clear this out so that they can get the place going.